Welcome, everybody, to Nobody Listens to Kevin, a podcast where I tell you the truth about life and relationships that you will not hear anywhere else. Today, I want to address this question, which is, why is everyone breaking up? I don't know if you've noticed in your inner circle, but I'm seeing this a lot in my private practice and with my own friends and family, my own inner circle. It seems that people are breaking off their engagements more than ever. It seems that young couples, people ages 25 to 45, are divorcing more than ever. And it seems that people who were so well suited for each other, you see this couple and they're so in love and they seem to be so happy with each other. All of a sudden, one day you wake up and you hear from your aunt or your friend or whatever that so-and-so broke up. And it's baffling. I could make an episode on why breakups and divorces happen, but the reasons for that are innumerable. There's infidelity, there's lying, there's communication issues, there's family issues. It runs the gamut. What I want to talk about is why breakups are so common right now in 2025 and why they are so common, particularly in my generation, which is, I would say, people ages 25 to 45. My generation has a lot of things going for us, but relationships is not one of them. We always joke about how in school we learned the Pythagorean theorem, but we never learned financial literacy and we never learned how to have a healthy and happy relationship, which is part of the reason that I wanted to go into this line of work, is that I was seeing around me so much emotional malnutrition or malpractice when it comes to our relationships. I would see that people my age are so good at so many things. We're entrepreneurs and we're tech people and we're smart and we're great at having friends and we're great at making money and having businesses. But when it comes to relationships, we all seem incredibly lost. And that brings me to the overarching reason why I believe that breakups are so prevalent right now, which is that in this generation, we simply do not date correctly for marriage. And the way that I'm phrasing that is very important. It's not that we are not marriage material, and it's not that we treat each other poorly in the dating process, although both of those things can be true with certain people, of course. It's that we don't date correctly for marriage. And what that means is that, of course, in this generation, wanting to get married and wanting to have kids is less common than it was with previous generations. But there are still a lot of people, particularly if you're a first generation American, if you come from an immigrant community, there are still hundreds of thousands, if not millions of millennials who want to get married and they want to start families. And if that's what you want, then I'm here to tell you that there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. I'm not a believer in the idea that everything is a gray area and everything is subjective. The truth is that when it comes to relationships, particularly long-term, healthy, happy, successful relationships, if you do certain things, you're going to get certain positive results. And if you do certain other things, you're going to get certain negative results. And the way that I know that this is true is that in my private practice, what I've seen over the last 5-6 years consistently is that everybody has a different story, but it's the same underlying emotional issues. There are patterns of behavior that you see over and over and over again that, regardless of where the person comes from or where they met or what he said or how long they've been together, what she said, etc., you see that certain behaviors lead to the desired outcome, which in this case would be healthy, lasting, long-term relationship. And other behaviors lead to other outcomes, which in this case would be breakups. So if we're starting from the perspective that you want to date for marriage, then we have to accept the premise that certain inputs are going to equal certain outputs. Now, that might be self-explanatory, but here's the thing. That was self-explanatory to previous generations, okay? Our parents and our grandparents knew that if you do certain things, it's going to result in a successful marriage. And they had certain structures and rules or guidelines in place. Our generation, we did away with all of that. Now, that's partially because every generation thinks that they're smarter than the previous one, but it's also partially because of the influence of technology and social media. When you go on Instagram, you see 100 people like me on your For You page telling you what to do and how to have a healthy relationship and how to make money and how to do X, Y, and Z, right? So we basically were raised with this idea that everything is up for interpretation. And we have so many different influences telling us what we should do and what we shouldn't do, that the old traditional structures that were in place, which are really safeguards, they were put there to help us get what we want, right? Those things, we've all done away with them and we've created our own set of rules. But as a result of creating our own set of rules, we're really just more confused than ever. It's kind of like with the dating apps. Dating apps were invented to give us more options so that we could become more successful in our pursuit of a relationship. But the advent of dating apps just resulted in everybody having too many options and being too confused. Anyway, I digress. That's actually one of the reasons that everybody is breaking up, but we'll get to that. When it comes to dating correctly, if your intention is marriage, there are a few principles that you need to uphold while you are in a relationship in order to basically keep the relationship afloat and not fizzle out. The first principle is that you have to remember to be marriage minded. And what that means is that the purpose of your relationship is not to satisfy your fun. It's not there for your entertainment. Everybody will tell you this is the time. Let's say you're a year into dating, 6 months into dating. Everybody's going to tell you this is the time to get to know the person, go out with the person, travel with the person, make sure you have fun, make sure you can sit across from each other and watch a movie together. Okay, all of that stuff, sure, it's part of the dating process, but it doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't make you marriage minded. And what I mean is that the first year or couple of years of dating are not for having fun. They are for figuring out if you and this person are compatible for the long term. You have to date for compatibility, not for chemistry. And if you are dating for compatibility, then that means you're going to have some very uncomfortable conversations. It means that you're going to have to start asking questions that you have never asked before. You have to ask about the person's family. You have to ask about their mental health history. You have to talk about fertility. You have to talk about finances and money. You have to talk about traumatic events. You have to reveal your past to them. These are all very, very deep subjects that when I tell my clients this, you got to know the truth of these subjects if you're preparing to spend the rest of your life with this person. Keyword is preparing, right? If you are not preparing, you are preparing to fail. Failure to prepare is preparation to fail, basically. My clients will always say to me, oh my God, I can't ask him that question, or I can't ask her that. Like, that sounds crazy, right? And they'll also say, oh, it's way too soon to have that conversation. I'm not saying that on the second date, you need to air out all of your dirty laundry. But if you've been dating somebody for several months, 6, 8 months, whatever, you're considering them as a prospect for marriage, and you don't want to run the risk that you're going to wake up one day and find out some piece of information, and then you have to break up because you didn't know it 6 months earlier or a year earlier, then you got to start having those very uncomfortable conversations. Not only do you have to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but you also have to communicate more frequently than you think. So I have a little rule that I go by when it comes to relationship counseling, which is communication is everything, and everything needs to be communicated. What that means is that the quality of the relationship will always be directly proportional to the quality of the communication and the frequency of the communication. So it's not only that you need to communicate effectively, it's that you need to communicate everything, which means that you need to have these conversations a lot more often than you think. Couples will have a conversation once every 2 or 3 months, and they'll be like, wow, yeah, I feel like I really, I got to know him or her better, like during that conversation. If you're thinking about marrying this person, you got to be having those conversations on a weekly basis. It doesn't mean that every time you talk, you're going to have some like breakthrough where you start crying or something, but we need to up the frequency of those difficult conversations, not only so that you can connect, but also so that you can find out information sooner. In other words, the purpose of dating is not to have fun. The purpose of dating is to gather information and to suss out your compatibility with this person, to figure out if your values are aligned, to figure out if you want the same things in the future. So the first part of not dating correctly for marriage that I think is missing is that people just aren't communicating correctly, and they're not communicating nearly often enough. So the first part of not dating correctly for marriage is that people are dating for fun. They're not dating for compatibility. And therefore, they're not communicating often enough, and they're not going deep enough. The deeper you go, the more you talk to your partner, the more information you can find out sooner. In other words, you're not here to have fun. You're here to gather information, and you're here to figure out if your values align with this person and if you want the same things in life. Something that I see happening so often is that a couple will date for 2 years and they'll get engaged. And then one day I'll hear that so-and-so broke off their engagement, and then somehow it'll get back to me that it was literally like on a Tuesday, they were doing great. On a Wednesday, they woke up, they had a certain conversation. The guy found out something about the girl that if he had known at month number 3, they wouldn't have just invested 2 years and an engagement into this relationship, right? The guy would have known that, okay, this either works for me and we got to work out whatever the issue is, or this doesn't work for me and he can jump ship. But because they're not having those types of conversations, you find out that information often when it's very late into the game. I think one of the reasons people are focused on having fun and not having those hard conversations is that in my generation, people tend to get physical way too quickly. Now, if you're 20 years old and you're dating somebody and you slept with that person the first or the second night that you met them, and then it just so happens to be that that's your college sweetheart and then you get married, then good for you. That's not the majority of cases. The majority of cases are, let's say a guy is 35 and the girl is 20. In this case, we're talking about a heterosexual relationship before everybody goes crazy in the comments, okay? And they get together, they really like each other, they go out, they have a couple of drinks on the first, second date, they're really attracted to each other, boom. They go home, they sleep together, they wake up the next day, they're like, oh, was it bad that we did that? Should we not have done that? Oh my God. And then they're like, no, it's okay. We really like each other. And yeah, like there was so much chemistry and, the sparks were flying and whatever. Okay, listen, if it starts with a bang, it ends with a fizzle. The hotter it starts, the colder it ends. I've said this over and over again, right? And this is not because I'm trying to be the sex police or ruin everybody's fun. If you want to sleep with somebody because you want to date them casually, then far be it from me to stop you. I wouldn't recommend it, but if casual dating or friends with benefits or whatever is what you're going for right now, then that's your choice. But if you are dating for marriage and you sleep with the person right off the bat, you have immediately created a false attachment to the person. You have immediately created a sense of familiarity, a sense of closeness, a sense of attachment, a sense of attraction that you have no idea if those things are actually going to lead you in the direction of a long-term relationship. In other words, before you know this person's mind, heart, soul, brain, family, history, etc., you know their body. And because you know their body, you think you know them, right? And nothing could be further from the truth. So again, in previous generations, we had these safeguards in place. People would tell you, go ask your grandmother, what the situation was with her and your grandfather, Bobby. I guarantee you that Mary Sue and Bobby did not get together, have a few drinks at the bar, then go home, sleep together, and then ride off in the sunset. It was probably some sort of arranged marriage. They were neighbors. They met, they went on walks for like 3 months. Then they had their first kiss or whatever, and it was really romantic. And then the relationship progressed from there. And that's one of the reasons that your grandparents have been together for 65 years, is that they had those safeguards. Now, listen, our parents and grandparents' generations, they had plenty of problems too. I'm not saying that we should envy or emulate their relationships across the board, but I am saying that some of those traditional norms will keep us from shitting the bed on this. Another thing that I think is really important to mention just before we close out this episode is that we tend to say way too much to the wrong people, and we tend to listen to way too much from the wrong people. So I referenced this earlier when I was talking about going on your For You page and there's 100 different gurus telling you what to do and how we get confused. But I think that even if you're listening to your inner circle, which is your family and your friends, your coworkers, we often make the mistake of airing out our dirty laundry to the wrong people. And they're not the wrong people because they don't love us. They're the wrong people because they love us too much. So for example, let's say I'm dating a girl and I think it's going really well, but then we get into this fight and I go tell my best friend or I go tell my mom what we fought about. My best friend and my mom are most likely going to say something like this along these lines. They're going to say, "Oh, you deserve better than that. And, the truth is you're such a great guy. Nobody's ever going to be good for you. And, you shouldn't put up with that. And you need to have higher standards," and all of that kind of stuff. Now, listen, sometimes that's true. Sometimes we do need to have higher standards. Sometimes the other person is behaving in a way that is unacceptable and they deserve to get kicked out of our lives. But if every time you have an issue with your significant other, you go tell your family or your friends about that, two things are going to happen. First thing that's going to happen is that those people around you are immediately going to have a negative association to this person who is supposed to become your spouse. And it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to live that down, and it's going to create a lot of stress in your life. The second thing that's going to happen is that if you listen to all of the people who love you and tell you that you can do better, then pretty soon you're going to be out of options. One huge mistake that people in our generation make is they think that the options are limitless. Again, because of technology and social media and dating apps and our dating culture. We think, oh, if this person doesn't work out or I find out this thing that I don't like, you just toss them to the side and you go on to the next, right? And you see people cycling through this. They throw relationships away like, plastic water bottles or whatever. In previous generations, they kind of thought, all right, listen, this person fits the basics of my checklist. Yep, they may come with this baggage, but I got to work it out. And I have to change myself and they have to change themselves. And I'm not going to go around telling everybody what the issues are in our relationship because A, that's going to be way too many negative influences in my ear. And B, like I said, now everybody's perception of my relationship and my spouse is morphed and distorted. And then I'm going to have to live that down. So my recommendation is that when there are issues in your relationship, you should always communicate about it with two people. One is your partner, two is a couples counselor, right? Somebody who can be objective. Somebody who can get to know you, but they don't love you. They're not overly invested in the success or failure of your relationship. They're able to see things from a more rational and unbiased perspective. And when there's an issue that you're having with your spouse, going back to the first point, you need to communicate about it to your spouse. And however long it takes to talk about it and talk it through is how long it takes. It could be an hour, it could be several hours, it could be days, it could be weeks. You talk and you talk and you talk and you do your best to work it out. You bring in somebody from the outside. And if you're dating for marriage, you've got to have this mentality that I'm stuck, right? That I have to make this work. That getting out of this is not an option, but it is the last option. And people pull the breakup trigger way too soon. Again, mostly because they think they have unlimited options and they're not dating with the right mindset. There are lots of negative influences that are seeping in and distorting their perspective. If you know somebody who is on the verge of a breakup, send them this episode. I hope this resonated with you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime.